Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second Dashboard Dojo. I've got Kyle helping out. My name is David Carnes. I'm the founder and CEO of OpFocus. We're a Boston and Toronto-based consultancy. We work with SaaS companies on their go-to-market tech stacks and optimizing those, doing things with systems, data, process, and reporting. You can find me on Twitter at my Twitter handles here. I try to tweet every day about reports and dashboards, some days more than others. But it's a nice place to catch me with a question. And questions are always welcome because it's invariably how I end up learning. This topic of trending is such a big one. I think so many of us don't ever quite reach that point with trending. My sense is that there's a gap between what the leaders that we serve need and would benefit from and what we're able to put together from what's obvious and from what's not so obvious within Salesforce reports and dashboards. So the thought today in the dojo is to actually step through a number of the topics and different ways that we can do trending and some different ideas. Last time I jammed the session with so many topics about filters that if you missed it, you can see the recording on the OpFocus YouTube site and also on the dashboarddojo.com. But for today, I have fewer topics all related to trending, and we'll have a little bit more time to get in and tinker with the system. So let's talk about what we're going to do. So just like last time, I'm very curious who's joining us for the call. I'll share a little bit about myself, where the idea for the Dashboard Dojo came from. I always want to talk about weapons in the arsenal, and I'll talk about the dev orgs that I use for all the presentations I give and all my tinkering, why I choose a very specific type of dev work. So then we'll get into techniques and practice. So in Japanese, it's waza and shiai. Shiai is a word used for games and sparring and matches and that sort of thing. And waza is used for techniques. We'll talk about some upcoming dojo dates. I've got a date scheduled in November and one in December. I'll share a little bit about my upcoming training sessions and an event that my team at OpFocus will host next week around building a foundation. And this is, specifically for SaaS metrics, but a lot of it applies to other organizations as well. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. I noticed last time I was watching the Q&A part of Zoom more than I was watching chat. I've got the chat window open and Kyle will help me out along the way. We might save some questions for the end, but certainly welcome the interaction. All right, so when we met last time, I just shared the participants that we had. So the majority of folks that joined us last time were in B2B organizations, so business to business. There were some that were in B2C, a chunk that are in higher ed. We've got folks that are solo on their own, and then an equal amount of folks from nonprofits. So that's fantastic because across this group, we represent so many different reporting needs. So I think it's very exciting. I would like to start with two quick polls, and I'm curious specifically about the trending that each of you are doing. So just very simply, how much trending are you doing now within your Salesforce instance? Kyle, could you pop up that poll, please?
Yep, it should be open for participants to participate in.
So just very simple, not doing any trending, some but not a lot, or a lot. And a lot is obviously a relative thing, but I think it's helpful to just have a sense of what everybody's thinking that they're doing.
All right, I will go ahead and share the results.
Great. All right. So many of you have none. So let's work on that. We can work on that today. And I'm pleased to see that a few have a lot as well. I'm curious, for those of you that are trending, and maybe some of you that said none on the first question might realize that you are using some trending tools. Why don't we go ahead and launch the second poll? And I'm just curious, within Salesforce, what Salesforce trending tools are you already using? And these will essentially be the topics that we'll run through today.
All right, so the second poll should be available.
Yeah, and just to explain these, grouping on dates, a lot of us have, leads created, opportunities created, cases created, and we group them by dates. And we'll talk about some creative ways to group things by dates. That's one way to put things on a chart and look at a trend. Another is to take advantage of a function within a formula. Specifically, the PREVGROUPVAL function allows you to do things like month over month comparisons, like what was the increase or decrease month over month, actual record counts, dollar amount changes, or percentage changes. We can do interesting math with that. There's an old report type on opportunities called opportunity trends. There's historical trending, reporting snapshots, and if you have something else, I'm curious. Why don't we go ahead and share that, Kyle?
Sure. And people did share in the chat that there was a mix-up on my end where folks were only allowed to submit one answer. So I do apologize.
Okay, all right.
For that.
So we should have made it. What was the best one, guys? I'm sorry that I didn't catch that. All right. Well, why don't we keep going? It's great to see that some of you have tried different things. So just to reiterate who I am, again, David Carnes, founder and CEO of OpFocus. I've been in the Salesforce community now. Somehow it's 15 years have gone by. It's funny with reporting how many things haven't changed. And yes, on the surface, a lot of things have changed because we moved to Lightning, but there are still some concepts like opportunity trends. I don't know that it's changed in 15 years, what we can do with it. I've been a Lightning champion for the last couple of years, which has been great, trying to help people adopt Lightning. I used to teach 100 years ago, and probably some of you in this used to teach for Salesforce 100 years ago, and I still teach 3 times a year. And I was a tour guide at this beautiful castle in Himeji, Japan. It was amazing. So a little bit about our sponsor, OpFocus. So we're spread out across the US and Canada. We're a Salesforce Gold partner, and we're very focused on SaaS revenue operations. All right, so as I shared last time, the word dojo is very special. It's interesting translations for this. We think of it as a place for people to go learn martial arts, but it's got another meaning, the place to learn the way, and I've always liked that. And a dojo doesn't necessarily have to be a physical space, though we think of it that way. And clearly in the virtual world, this is what we're up to these days. But I mentioned earlier, a lot of people have asked me over time, like what type of org I do my tinkering in and what type of org I demo in. I prefer an Einstein Analytics dev org, and they're still called that, even though yesterday Salesforce rebranded Einstein Analytics to Tableau CRM. So you can see the logo up in the top right. But you can have as many dev orgs as you need. There's no limitation. I think after about a year, if you haven't logged in, Salesforce starts to delete old orgs. So I get notifications from things I haven't looked at for 2 or 3 years, and those just go away. The reason that I use this type of org, there are 3 reasons. One, it has more data in it. So it has thousands of records, where if you just spin up a regular dev org, if you go to developer.salesforce.com and sign up for a dev org there, you might have 50 records. So it's harder to do reporting. The second reason is that Einstein Analytics is there, and we can play with that. And there are licenses within these dev orgs. The third reason is a tool called the Trailhead Data Manager that lets you move dates forward on things. And it manages essentially this pile of sample data. So I think they're great, and it's pretty much all I'll ever demo with. And I've got 2 orgs to show you stuff in today, and they're both this type of org. All right, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So WASA is the word for techniques. I want to go back over simple trending, because I think there's some misunderstanding about what we can do with grouping. There's an ancient field on the opportunity object. There's a second close date field. And a lot of people scratch their heads and say, why in the heck would that exist? And that goes back to before formulas existed, that we wanted to group by 2 different ways on dates, but we couldn't do it any other way. So Salesforce actually hard-coded a second close date field. And every now and then we'll need a third close date field. Every time you group on a column, that column is no longer visible. So I could even see within even the report examples we'll do today that I might actually want a third close date field. So I could just use one of my 500 or so custom formula fields on that object and just create a field that just displays what's in the close date. So we'll talk about simple trending using dates. We'll talk about month over month trending using that very scary but super easy PREVGROUPVAL function. So it's such a long function. I waited way too long to start playing with this, and it's great. So we'll talk about that. We'll dig into what's called the Opportunity Trends Report. This has been in Salesforce forever. I think I kind of turned my nose up at it about 10 years ago and didn't use it for a while, but I think it's a really easy way. It's pre-built. It's just automatically snapshotting things for you to support month-over-month trending specifically on opportunities. We'll also talk about historical trending. This is a feature that is not new. It's been in Salesforce for years. It works a little differently in Lightning, which is a little frustrating. I don't think that this is really a trending tool. I wish they called this what changed since last week. And it's super useful for that and maybe a little less useful for what we think of as trending. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about two other standard report types. There's one called Opportunity History and the other is called Opportunity Field History, and they have slightly different use cases. And I want to share another concept for trending, actually putting two charts side by side. And maybe there's this cataclysmic event like coronavirus, and we want to see what the world looked like before coronavirus and have a separate chart next to it, seeing what the world looks like after coronavirus or during coronavirus. And that's another type of trending. So, you know, if we think of like on the periphery, when we start to combine these techniques, we start to get to the really interesting stuff. And, you know, keep in mind that you've got a lot of room to maneuver on a dashboard. And sometimes charts actually look different on a dashboard. And I'll show you an example of that. The last topic we'll talk about is reporting snapshots. Again, not a new feature. Been around a long time. In fact, we've had one running in the OpFocus system for a decade now, which is kind of cool. It's just been running every single week, Monday night at 11 p.m. It's been running like clockwork. All right, so let's dive in. So this trending using dates. First off, it's really valuable to be able to just show any kind of trending to leadership, right? To just understand what was it before, what is it now. What we have here is an example of a report chart showing month over month, year over year reporting of closed won sales. And we're just grouping by the dates twice. So you can see 5 years of data by month. So January over on the left, and then February, and then March, and you can start to see seasonality. So this is really easy to do. You don't need to set anything up to do it. And I'll just show you a couple techniques. I do want to point out that on the top image is what it looks like on a report, and the bottom image is what it looks like on a dashboard. And I feel like it starts to shine a little bit more on the dashboard, you know, for whatever reason. So this is just simple trending, and let's talk about how to do it. So I mentioned those two close date fields on opportunities. So if we're creating a report on opportunities, or if you're with a nonprofit, this could be related to, you know, fundraising efforts, donations. And so I've got my report on the opportunity object, and I'm grouping it twice, once on close date and once on close date 2. And the secret here is to go to the down arrow next to each one of these, click on it, and then group dates by. And the outer one, which feels counterintuitive, the outer one is by year. And then the inner one is over here on the right. I'm not sure why the scale is different on these two images, my bad. The outer one, you do the same thing. So the inner one, you go to close date 2, group date by, and make that calendar year. So the inner one is calendar year. And that's why within the month of April, you have 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, et cetera. So I think this is just a great way to just throw some images up and just see, is there any seasonality in your business? For a lot of us, there is, and sometimes it's hidden. It's just hidden in plain sight that we don't realize that maybe April and November just aren't great months for an organization, or maybe it's something different in your organization. So I want to show this in action, and I'm sort of revealing that my data set in this org that I've been spending time with, a lot of time with this year, it just doesn't have a lot of data. So it's not quite shining. This is what it might look like up on top if I had more data. But let's just go in and build this out. So if I go back into the system, I've created a report on opportunities. And you can see here that I've grouped it twice on close date. I've also gone ahead and added the chart on top. But the secret here is when you group by close date, the default is that it groups actually by day. And so within a year, you'd have 360, whatever. So you want to change that quickly. You don't really want to look at it unless you have a very transactional business. You might actually be interested in looking at the business every single day. But if I go to this outer one, the first one, go to the group date by, and then for that one, choose the calendar month. And then for the inner one, go ahead and group dates by, and I need to scroll down. So what was the outer one? Well, that's unfortunate. Let me just rerun that. Always has to be something. So the images on my screen were overlapping each other, which is less fun. Okay, so if we go back to the outer one, group dates by, and this one I wanted to point out that you actually want to scroll down. It's calendar month and year, and then the outer one is not calendar month. I misspoke. I forgot my own tip here to just scroll down. The outer one should be calendar month and year, and the inner one should be calendar year, and then that creates that particular type of grouping. So you can see here, I have a limited set of data in this instance, but if I go ahead and run this, there's a little bit of overlap. So I don't really have a lot of 2019 data for the early months of last year. And then there's just a little bit of overlap here. So the sample data isn't great. So I apologize for that, but you can start to see it take shape that you've got the month of May and you've got the 2 years side by side within that. All right, so let's talk about calculating month-to-month trends. And this is using summary formulas and something called PREVGROUPVAL function, which is super useful. So the key thing to do is to create a report and either group it by close month, as I've done here, or group it by close date and then group those dates by month. So, either way is fine. But then what we're doing after you've added your first grouping, you can add a summary formula, and the summary formula will look like this: amount sum. So the current sum, subtract the prior grouping's sum. So it's the amount sum of the close month, which is within this PREVGROUPVAL function. It's basically saying go get the last month. And we can see this up in this top right corner. The top month will always be blank because there is nothing else for it to compare it to. That data doesn't exist on this report. So for this report, it must start on Salesforce's fiscal year, February 1st. And so we have the sum of the closed won amount for the month of February 2019. And then I have the same thing for March. And then in this summary formula, it's just doing the math. It's taking that 11.5 million and subtracting the 7.9, and that gives us the 3.5 million over here. Now we can get a little bit more interesting. There's nothing stopping us from actually writing some interesting formulas. And over here, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm actually calculating the percentage of change. And you can see that $3.5 million change is a 45% change. And I can go even one step further on the report and actually add conditional highlighting. So I can have, positive changes above a certain amount appear green, negative changes appear red if I want. Maybe something in the middle is that yellow color. Great. So let's go, let's actually go take a look at this. And I thought to show it, kind of an interesting use case of a trend. So I've got wacky data in my dev org, but it actually helps prove an interesting point that, your business may have ups and downs, and we can actually use a month over month calculation like this to actually show it. And what I've done is I've added a conditional highlighting line there, reference line. Oddly enough, you can't add a reference line at 0, but you can add a reference line at 1. And when we're talking about millions of dollars, I can't add it at 0, but I figured out I could add it at 1, and that looks the same. So basically, I put a nice red line in there to show that. But let's go take a look at this. So I'll go ahead and close this first one. So this is that report that I have built out. And just to show these formulas, I have the two formulas here side by side, and the way that I added those. When you're in a report, once you've added your first grouping to the report, so in this case, I've grouped it on close date. And then I went down within the close date and I said, make it grouped by calendar month using that close date. Once you've added that first grouping, you can now go to add a summary formula. So each report in Salesforce can have up to 5 summary formulas. The summary formulas exist each on their own separate island. They can't reference each other, so they're their own separate thing. In this case, I've added 2. And if we go take a look at the first one, the month over month change in dollars, what we can see here, I'll make it a little bit bigger, is I've just taken the sum of the amount, and the way that I added that, I've got in the field editor that Salesforce added last year, and I think this is a fantastic, it's the best field editor, sorry, the best formula editor in Salesforce. It's available for summary formulas and row level formulas. Basically, it looks the same. We have a field tab here, and we have a functions tab. And on the field tab, I can just scroll down, pick my column such as amount, and then I can click insert, and it'll drop the amount : sum here. And then I've just used basic math, had a subtraction. And then I've used this function called PREVGROUPVAL. And if you're not familiar with using functions, this is a great thing to learn. They work just like they do in Excel. So if I scroll down, these 2 really super powerful functions are hidden at the bottom of the function list. Parent group val, that allows you to compare a month to the total. So let's say that we looked at our total donations received last year, and we looked at it by month. We wanted to know each month compared up against the grand total for the year. What does that look like? I would use parent group val function for that. In this case, I just wanted to use PREVGROUPVAL, and there's a nice, if you click on it, you get a nice definition here. There's a link to open up Salesforce doc to help you, more help on this function. Basically, this function takes three items. It takes what field are you summing? So we're summing up the amount. What grouping level? We only have one on the report, so I just have to reference the one that we have. So you can see grayed out over here, we just have the one grouping level. Salesforce, for whatever reason, can't figure it out on its own. And then the third thing is, it's optional, is increment. If you don't specify an increment, it's going to assume that you're incrementing 1. I'm just comparing this month against the last month. If you needed to compare this month against 3 months ago, and you always wanted to do this month against 3 months ago, you could put a comma and put a 3 for the increment. The largest increment you can do is 12. That way I can do this month against the same month 12 months ago. So it'd be, this October compared to last October, if you wanted to do that. So that's the formula. The output in this case would be a currency. I tend to get rid of my decimals, and then I just try to label it mom or something, month over month. And then we can see what the output looks like here. And this is just in our preview window. But then what I've done is I've added the chart. And I really think this is quite meaningful, what this looks like month to month, to just see this visually. And just to show one other element with the chart properties, I can go ahead and click the gear here. And you can see the show reference line. And I do want to show you that little quirky thing of, if I have a reference line of 0, it just disappears, and I can't explain it, but for whatever reason, if I have 1, there it is again. So just to throw that in there, that can add some more pop to the visual. Now, I did go ahead and add that slightly more complicated formula. It's really not that complicated, but we're just doing the month over month percentage change. And for some of us, that's very meaningful, month to month. Are we growing? And just to show you that formula quickly, and it's the amount, the sum of the amount minus the prior month, and then I'm dividing it by the prior month. So we're comparing the delta from last month to this month divided by what the total value was last month. And we can see, is it a positive or a negative change? And I've got the output as a % on that. So interesting stuff. Hope that's useful for you. I do want to point out the Opportunity Trends report. So this has been around forever. It automatically snapshots the first day of each month. So this has been in Salesforce forever. A lot of us just sort of skip over and don't make use of it. It has a slightly different structure to the output. It's adding some very special fields. So it's adding a field called as of date. It's adding a historical stage, and it's also adding a historical amount. And I want you to be really creative with how you use those. So I could say, as of, give me where all the opportunities were as of the first day of each month going back through the past year. Or I could actually flip it on its side and I could say, as of, where are all those opportunities that were created in each of those months, where are they now? And I could group it by the current stage, for example. I could sum the historical amount, I could sum the current amount. You can do some interesting things with this. So the Opportunity Trends Report, it gives us some special filters that we can take advantage of. And you can see the screenshot here. I can filter on historical amount, historical stage, historical close date, even the probability. I can also zero in on specific as of dates. So I could just do the as of dates in 2020 so that I'm just doing trending on this year. Similarly, we have some special columns that are available. So basically the same ones, historical stage, historical close date. I want to show you something, sort of two different ways to use this, right? So straight up, you could look at, as of each month, what was the amount by stage for ops that were open at that time. So as of August 1st, what was open at that time? What was the size of the pipeline as of that time? As of September 1st, as of October 1st, what was the total amount? And usually I'll group it by the historical stage as well. So I'll sum up the amount, and this is giving you a monthly sum of your pipeline. This is a great option if you have not set up a reporting snapshot, and it's also a great option if monthly is good enough for your needs. Okay, so you can see here that I've grouped the rows by historical stage, and I've grouped the columns. So this is essentially a matrix report. I've grouped it by the as of date, and you can just see the sum of the dollar amounts in each of the stages as of those dates. So you don't have to do anything. This is already set up, and you can take advantage of this. Now, one other interesting use case for this is actually giving you a glimpse into your sales cycle. So if we just change this around slightly and we group on the current stage. So for ops as of the first of each month, what is the current amount by the current stage? And sort of an interesting thing gets revealed, and you can see across a whole bunch of months. And in this particular Salesforce instance, we have dead, won, and lost. And it looks like the one is green, the lost is beige, and the dead is blue. And if you go back enough months, there isn't anything that's still open, and we can kind of get a sense of what the sales cycle is in this particular business. So it looks like there might be some outlier opportunities that have been open for many, many months, but for the majority of opportunities in this business, and maybe I also look at this instead of by summing up the amount, maybe I just look at it with a straight record count as well, so that it's not skewed to some big deal being open for many, many, many months, but just looking straight opportunity record counts. Okay. Something that happened over time when Salesforce moved to Lightning, that the pick list order in the sorting on charts kind of got lost. And so if I were to do this in real life, I probably wouldn't put up with the alphabetized stages. I might actually either I'd create a row level formula that says if the stage is this, make it a 1 dot, I put numbers, 2 dot, in front of each of the stages. And then I would group on that and sort by that. And I would see my stages in the order that I want to see them. I want to see the won, lost, and dead all together like these. You can see these colors here. And I want to see the rest of the stages in order. So that's one thing that's sort of fallen off in Lightning, that the pick list order isn't held like it was in Classic. All right, let's talk about another feature, which is historical trending. This is not a new feature. This allows you to track 3 months of changes plus the current month. So the prior 3 months plus the current month, as long as you turn it on. And you can see here in my screenshot, if I go under Setup, Analytics, Reports and Dashboards, Historical Trending, I can see the check mark to enable historical trending. So on opportunities, it's super simple. It's a checkbox and click Save. There are 3 standard objects that are available. You can also do this on up to 3 custom objects. So if that's meaningful to you. And what this does for you, you can see up here in the top right corner that I might see a list of opportunities that were open 7 days ago. and see what was the stage 7 days ago, what's the stage now, what was the close date 7 days ago, what is it now, and I can highlight the changes, and I can highlight them either green or red. So I mentioned the slightly wonkiness with pick lists with Lightning. This has to be turned on, and you have to let some time go by. So when we do this in my 2-day reporting class, we turn it on the first day and we use it on the second day. You also need to have some changes to the data to be able to see these red and green colors. So that sort of makes sense, right? So again, this is available on cases, opportunities, one of the forecast objects, it's like forecast items, and then on up to 3 custom objects, and you can pick the fields that it's tracking a historical value and a current value. So this is the thing that I said earlier. Salesforce called it historical trending. I don't know if it's really trending. It's like, I wish they called it what changed since last week, because that's what a lot of directors of sales ops have asked. Please tell me what changed since last week. So this is great for that. Let's go take a look. So what does this let us do? So we'll just see up here in the top left corner, when you go to create a report, after you've turned this on, what Salesforce does is it creates a custom report type behind the scenes. It's called opportunities with historical trending. So once that's in place, then you can create a report on it. So again, you have to turn on the feature, then you can start using it. So when you select that and create a report with it, it's a slightly different report builder that we're working with, because for each of the fields that you're tracking the historic values, you have a historical column and then a current value. We also have the ability to control the reds and greens for increases in green and versus increases in red. So out of the box, this flips around close dates, and it thinks a positive growth in a close date is good. It's usually not for most of us. We want deals to close sooner. We don't want them to close later. So this is an easy one to flip. I'll usually go right to show change on that close date column. You go to the pull down, choose show change, and then flip it from green to red if it's a positive change, an increase. So every now and then you need to flip these. So the other thing we can see here on the screenshot on the bottom is that you can also just highlight red or green the change, or you can show the changed value. We could do that on close dates and on amounts. So I could show how many days did it change. It got 4 days closer, or it was pushed out 30 days, that sort of thing. So why don't we go take a look at this for someone on our team called Julie. We might be having a one-on-one meeting with her to coach her on her pipeline. And maybe before I go into the meeting, I just want to run it as her manager to just see what's changed since last week. What has she been working on? What updates has she made? So if we go into the system and let's see where I put it. Well, we can just go. So oh, that's delightful. I feel like somebody's been in my system here. There's a funny filter thing going on that I haven't figured out yet, but let's just go ahead and build it. So we're going to opportunities, creating a new report under opportunities. Because I've turned this on, I have the option opportunities with historical trending. And a couple of things to point out right away, that there's this thing called snapshot dates. So we can compare yesterday to today, that's the default, but you can also have multiple snapshot dates, and you can compare a month ago to now, 2 months ago to now, first day this month to now, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. Why don't I do the 7 days ago to now? And that's going to add it as a second filter. It starts to get busy because now you have multiple historical columns. So you can see here in the historical, you can see 7 days ago and yesterday. And normally what I do is just drag that and put it immediately to the left of the amounts so that I see 7 days ago, yesterday, and amount. And I'll do the same thing for the close date historical and for the stage historical. You can also manage it over here down on the left. I can just drag and drop these historical ones. I feel like it starts to get kind of busy. You can actually show, I think it's 4 or 5 historical dates. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the one yesterday. So we'll just see 7 days ago versus now. Now that I've gotten a little bit of this cleaned up, I'll go ahead and remove that. We'll just see these particular values. Maybe I'll move the amount historical down because I'm being really anal. And I've got amount historical versus the current amount. Great. Now, if I go into my filters, the default, like a lot of report types, it just throws something in there. I don't want my opportunities because I'm an admin. And you can start to see the colors appearing here. And for this person, Julie, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the owner full name, and her name is Julie Chavez. And we can start to see the data here. Now, I said to you, a close date getting pushed into the future should be bad. So going from August 9th to October 16th, that should be bad. What I can do either in the edit environment or here in the run environment is I can actually format it the opposite way, switch it from green to red so that that's correct. This is probably correct the way it is, that if the opportunity amount went up by a little, like about 2K, it's green, that's good. But I could also, if I wish, show the change in value if that's helpful. One thing that does not seem to work like it did in Classic is the red and green on stage. It doesn't seem to be working the way you want. If you allow stages to go backwards in your sales process, then you will have any change will show up as green. So for some reason in Lightning, I think it has to do with that same pick list order change that isn't working the same as it did in Classic. I think that's impacting this. If, however, you only allow opportunities to move forward in the sales process, then this will work just fine. So we've got a question on this from Jen. For historical trending, AKA see what has changed, is this logged to a related list? So great question. There is a change coming in the new release. There is, and it's on opportunity list views, I think specifically. There is something coming with the change with like green arrow up and that sort of thing. But so currently, no, that's not there. But I saw something in the last week related to list views showing changes. So that's an exciting thing to come. Great question. All right, so let's talk about opportunity history versus field history. So this can be super confusing. For the rest of the objects, when you go under setup and you go to object manager and you turn on field history tracking, that essentially empowers a report type called the object history. But for opportunities, because there already was one called opportunity history, when you enabled field history tracking, it's called opportunity field history. So that can be an interesting challenge, that it works differently on opportunities than other objects. So the one called opportunity history, which is the first one in this screenshot here, there's no setup required. There are a handful of key fields that are just always tracked. Stages, forecast categories, amounts, probabilities, they're just always tracked. There are a few special features that are available, and I'm just showing the screenshot here on the left. Under opportunity history, you can track stage changes, stage duration, and then specifically for forecast, what it was and what it's changed to if the opportunity owner changed it. I do want to point out one other special feature for this, and it's one of those things I discovered. I was like, wow, I can't believe that that's there. Under edit filter, there's the ability to just filter on downgraded opportunities. So that's sort of interesting and random that that's there. So for the one called opportunity field history, this is related to the feature called field history tracking. It requires that you turn it on, and it requires that time go by. And this is more like standard logging, reporting on standard logging. So what field was changed on the opportunity? What was the old value? What's the new value? Who edited it and when did they edit it? And that's available to you. So again, this isn't necessarily trending, but it's data that you can dig into. Maybe you really want to dig into and do some research on sort of how salespeople are moving deals through their pipelines and the pace of stage changes. And maybe you want to export that to Excel and do the research over there. These can be helpful with that. But again, you need to activate this one for each of the objects that you want to report on it. Now, it's a little frustrating for me. I want to show you before I turn this on in this particular org. If I go into, I don't think I've turned it on for accounts. So if I look under here, account history is a choice here, but when we look behind the scenes, no data will be poured into it because I haven't turned on field history tracking. when you turn on field history tracking on any of these objects, it is consuming storage space. So that is a consideration. So I'm under Setup, Object Manager. I've gone to the Account object. I've gone to Fields and Relationships. And you can see this button over here. It says Set History Tracking. And you literally have to check a box to turn it on. And then you pick which columns are most important to you that you want to have logged. So this is another sort of strange thing with Salesforce reporting, that the report type is sitting there waiting for data, but there'll never be a lick of any data until you turn this on and let some time go by. So from this moment on, if I turn this on, it will start tracking changes. And I can just show you that I've already had that on another object called Cases. And if we go to Set History Tracking here, we can see that I've got it turned on for case origin, case reason, the status, the type, case owner, and case, things that probably typically change. All right. So I did want to show sort of an example of putting a chart next to another chart, and maybe there's this like, what was it, Mount Vesuvius when it exploded? People lived a certain way on the side of, on the verdant hills with that nice volcanic soil before Pompeii erupted, and then after Pompeii erupted, something else happened. And so you can do interesting things like this. So this is analysis using that out-of-the-box opportunity history report type. And I'm grouping dead opportunities, so ones that are lost or dead, and I'm grouping them by the stage that they were at before they were lost or dead. And before coronavirus, it looks like a lot of our deals would progress through the sales pipeline, and we got to negotiation, and that's where deals died. Whereas after, and essentially this is the same report, but one is saying opportunities that closed and are dead before whatever it was, April 1st or whatever, and then the ones since April 1st. And we can see that since the coronavirus started, our deals are dying earlier. We get to qualification and they're like, I have no budget, whatever's changed. So we can see over here on the left-hand side, when you create a report on opportunity history, you do have some different choices of columns, and I've grouped by the from stage on opportunities that are now, I've filtered it to just show ones that are lost or dead. So keep in mind that you can put things side by side on a dashboard, and it's essentially giving you that kind of before and after. All right, so another topic is reporting snapshots. This has been around for many, many years. These support building trend reports. A lot of us don't get to it. It feels complicated. It requires a system administrator. If you don't have those skills or those permissions, you'll have to be very clear, and I'll walk you through the steps. So essentially, you create a source report, and then you create a custom object to store that source report data. And what we're going to do is create a snapshot that says once a week, run this report, take this handful of values and put them over in this custom object. The data can be sourced by a tabular report, just rows and columns, or you can do a summary report. And this becomes it becomes important if you have more than 2,000 records that you need to snapshot. So rather than snapshotting every single opportunity, you might snapshot just the opportunity amounts by stage. So you'd create a summary report and dump the summaries in. And reporting snapshots support daily, weekly, or monthly trending, which is great. These are two old screenshots I had from Classic, and just to show you that, this is essentially 52 weeks of opportunity, open opportunity pipeline, and just grouped by stage. And usually what we do is put the contract stage at the bottom, and then whatever, like the proposal stage right above that. And then your top of the funnel, you put at the tippity top. So like prospecting or qualification would be at the top, and you can start to see a line across and tell a story of what's gone on with the open pipeline. Before I have 52 weeks of data, you can see that it sort of looked like, before you had a ton of data, it actually looks like separate columns with the striations. In Classic, we could add the second, and we can do it in Lightning as well, but I could add a second chart element here across the top. So let's talk about what you need to do to build one of these. And here's one in Lightning, and it looks a little different in Lightning, but this is again 52 weeks of data showing open pipeline that's been snapshotted each week. And essentially what you want to do is group by date, such as week, and then by stage. So we're grouping the snapshot data 2 ways. And then what I'd also do is sort the dates ascending so that they're growing to the right, and then sort the stages ascending so that the ones at the top are essentially like your prospecting. The ones at the bottom are your contract, whatever's closest to close. So there are essentially 5 steps to go create a reporting snapshot. You want to create a source report, and you need to store that report in a protected folder. Don't let people change the source report. So I would typically create a folder called System Reports, make it read only. Don't let other people change that. Then you create a custom object, and you go field by field, matching each of the columns. And you want to have a similar data type. It doesn't have to be the same data type, and I'll talk about that in a second. Typically on that custom object, we would just let people read the data, but not make changes to it. And then you also, when you create that custom object, want to allow reports. So looks like Bruce asked a great question. For snapshots, don't you need the assurance that the data is getting entered in a timely way? Yes, this is the only way that this is going to be worthwhile. And typically what I'd suggest is if your team has a weekly cadence of getting together, and let's say the data is as scrubbed as it's going to be on a Monday because the leadership team looks at this on a Monday, I would snapshot it right after that meeting. Snapshot it because that's going to be the cleanest the data would be if the organization is essentially religious about maintaining the data. If they're not, then sort of all bets are off. This isn't that useful. So great point, Bruce. Okay, so we said we create the source report, create the custom object, and then define the snapshot. And then you need some time to pass, right? So the reality is, let's say you do this monthly, you might need a couple of months to pass before you can actually show anybody the output of this. Because this is just like any other object, you could potentially manufacture some data and just use the data loader and load the data in, or you could expose a tab for this custom object and you could hand key in some data so that you could go create some reports and dashboards if you needed to. But again, the steps are to create the source report, create a custom object, define the reporting snapshot, let some time pass, and then you can create your reports on that custom object, that snapshot data. So why don't we go take a look at this? And I've already created, like Julia Childs, I've already created a source report, and I've already created a custom object. So we'll look at both of those. And I called this report the Open Pipeline Snapshot Source Report. You basically want to say, keep your paws off, don't change this. You do not need every column. You just need things that will be changing week to week. The one that OpFocus has had running for over a decade, we've got columns that nobody's ever used. And I was a little too aggressive adding, oh, I think maybe someday, 10 years from now, I'll need this. Really, if you have the opportunity name, the owner, the stage, the close date, the forecast category, the amount, that may be perfect for what your needs are. So create the report, be very intentional about the columns. And then the next step is to create the custom object. So I've already gone ahead and done that. And usually I'll use the same name for the custom object. So it'll be something like snapshot. Why don't I use the quick find? Okay, and it looks like I've created 2 in this. So I created one earlier today. The one I did before was actually using summary data, and I was just playing with something. So this one's called Open Pipeline Snapshot. And just to show you that for each one of the columns on my source report, I've created a corresponding custom field. So I've created one called amount, that's a currency. I've created one called close date, one called forecast category, etc. What you want to ensure is that the data type will accept the data. Like forecast category, this custom field here I created, I don't have to create it as a pick list. It can just store it as text, that's fine. And I just made the text larger. I made the data type larger than it would ever need to be to come over safely from the opportunity. The same is true with stage. Rather than creating a pick list and trying to keep up to date with all the pick list values, totally unnecessary, just store it as text. I did add one additional one called date. And this is where we're going to put the snapshot actual date. When we do the mapping, we're going to literally, let's say this week we have 50 open opportunities. That date is going to be, today's date is going to be put into every one of those when it gets pumped into the snapshot object. So let's go into the snapshot itself. So if I go under Setup, Feature Settings, Analytics, Reports and Dashboards, Reporting Snapshots, I can go create a new reporting snapshot, and literally there's just a couple of steps. So this is my weekly open pipe snapshot. I'll give it a name. The running user should be somebody that's high enough up in the organization that isn't going to be leaving 2 weeks from now, because it'll break the reporting snapshot. You want to pick a source report. So I have the one that I created here, and I put it into, usually I put it into a folder called System Folders. In this case, I just dumped it into a Dojo folder, and then I want to specify the target object. So now when we click Save, we actually want to edit the mappings. So I chose the button Save and Edit Mappings, and this should just take a second. It's literally giving you every column in the report and every column in the custom object, and you just map them up, map them up. So close date goes to close date. Execution time, this is the only tricky one, goes to date, that date field that I created. Forecast category goes to forecast category, not stage, forecast category, etc. Opportunity name, the owner, and then the last one is the stage. Now that I've defined the mappings, the last thing to do is to schedule it. So if you don't schedule, it's not running. So I'll go ahead and click Edit, and I'll say, go ahead and run this weekly. Maybe I run it every Monday night. And just note that it's going to shut off within a month unless you push that date out. So this is the last step, and then it's going to start running the report at that scheduled time, dumping the data into the custom object, and you can then go create a report on that. All right, so we've talked about a few different things today. Simple trending using dates. We've talked about month-over-month trending with PREVGROUPVAL. We've talked about opportunity trends report, which is that as of the first day of each month. We talked about historical trending, which really should be renamed What Changed Since Last Week. We've talked about opportunity history versus field history, the sort of the nuance between the two of those. And we've talked about reporting snapshots. All right, looks like Mary has shared, I work for an org that's not religious about maintaining data. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, and we really need users that are engaged and are compelled to maintain the data. If your organization, if the sales, and I'll just stay in the realm of sales here, if sales is coaching the team based on the data in the system, if leadership is running their forecast out of Salesforce, or looking at a pipeline report or that sort of thing out of Salesforce as opposed to tracking it separately in Excel, you're going to have a lot more likelihood to have good data to look at for trending. We do have the winter release is upon us. Some of you may already have the winter 21 release. The next tranche of orgs will be updated October 9th, and then the OpFocus system always seems to be updated last. The dev orgs are all updated the last weekend as well. That's October 16th. Within the release notes, there are two things for reports and dashboards. There's the subscribe to get report results delivered by email. That's a mouthful, which was a beta feature in the last release, is going to be GA, so it'll be available to all users. And then the exciting new thing is this beta feature, which when you create a custom formula field, it'll be auto added to existing custom report types. And to turn that on, I'm not logged into a winter 21 org, but I'll just show you. It's one click away here. Basically, this is for the summer release. This is how we turned on that beta feature. It's in the exact same place. So when your instance is upgraded to winter 21, you might come under Setup, Feature Settings, Reports and Dashboards, Report Dashboard Settings, and check that box for this auto add fields to custom report types. It's so long overdue. But we'll talk about, there's a gap with that. All that does is for new custom fields that are added from that moment forward, they'll be auto added to existing custom report types. But many of us have a gap of potentially years of custom fields not being added to our custom report types. So it feels like I've got a good blog article coming. All right, so if you want to find the Winter 21 release, all the release notes are available at releasenotes.docs.salesforce.com, and you can select which release you're interested in and read up on. And there's always a section for analytics, and within that, there's always a section for reports and dashboards. So we have a few more upcoming dojo sessions. I thought actually just to ask well, you know, let's skip the poll for today because I want to get to if other folks have questions. So for November 3rd, it's a separate registration for a session we'll do a Dashboard Dojo on doing more with dashboards. And I thought to do this as a hands-on. So if you're thinking you're going to be back, what I'm going to ask you to do before you come is to sign up for a special dev org. This is these Einstein analytics enabled ones that I mentioned. And I have a link for it here, the bit.ly/report org. And then I'm going to ask you to install a private App Exchange app into that org. Don't install it into your production org. And this private App Exchange app is available at this sforce.co/2nhg capital F O capital A. And I'll send this out before the next dojo session. But what I thought we'd do is I've got some old dashboards, and I thought we could just do a hands-on session where we're actually talking through the different types of changes we can do with dashboards and actually have some samples to play with. So in December, I'm still working on the special guests from Salesforce to join me to talk about the features that have come out in the last 4 or 5 releases. And you can register for these at dashboarddojo.com. I'm curious if other folks have questions. So thank you to Bruce and Jen and Mary for the comments and questions so far. Yes, Robin, we'll send out information about a recording. I did want to mention I teach 2 classes. I've got a class coming up a week and a half from now, a 5-day admin class. And then I teach a 2-day hands-on reporting workshop. These are through OpFocus. And I wrote the courses and been teaching them for years, and it's virtual instruction. So you can find these on the opfocus.com website. Next Wednesday at the same time, October 14th, just to share, we've got a number of folks at SaaS companies that are going to join us and talk about building out the foundation for SaaS metrics. So some of you I know are with SaaS companies. If you'd like to join us, there's information on the opfocus.com site. Right on the homepage on the left, there's a link to register for that. Oh, great question, Peter, about opportunity score. I love it. I just did a webinar with Salesforce last week. We had 1,000 people on the call, which was exciting and thrilling. So Peter's questions around opportunity score seems to be a field you can track within opportunity historical trending. I think that's great. Thank you for pointing that out. Something else that I'll point out that I shared on that Camp Success event last week with the Einstein team, you can take that opportunity score and multiply it by the amount, and you can come up with an AI weighted amount. So for years, we've had that field called expected revenue, which is the percentage times the amount. But you could do the same thing with opportunity score. And what you do is create a formula field, take the score, which ranges from 1 to 99, divide it by 100. So you get it essentially as a percentage and multiply it by the amount. So first you have to turn on opportunity score, and it's very, very simple to do that. Oh, thank you for the note, Jay. That's great. I've got my Twitter handle here. If you're not following me on Twitter, please do. And you can reach me there at any time. Also, I've got the upcoming dojo sessions. If you have any other questions, please fire away. Thanks for the note, Chris. That's great. Oh, Bruce, thank you very much. Appreciate the comments. So we'll be back together next month, November 3rd. So I did pick a very special day in this country anyway, that it's election day, so that we can all think about something else during election day. So come join us in the dojo to doing more with dashboards. Please register at dashboarddojo.com. So Eileen, great question. Hello, Eileen. Can opportunities with historical trending go back more than 90 days? So the answer is no. Well, yes and no. It's the prior 3 months plus the current month. So technically it could stretch to 120, but it's not logging beyond that. So it's really just the prior 3 full months plus whatever day. We're on the 7th day of this month, so we're somewhere around 98 days tracked. Oh, Bill, glad you joined us. All right. Well, why don't we let you get on to your next hour sessions. So pleased to have you join me, and look forward to seeing you again next month.